Welcome to John Redmann, Power of Attorney, the show that aims to empower you through knowledge of the law. I'm Attorney John Redmann.
And I'm Shauna Sanford. Welcome to the program. President Barack Obama has made immigration reform one of his key issues in the second term of office. And it's something that will impact everyone in our country. Louisiana Senator David Vitter is one of the leading voices opposed to the plan that's been proposed by a bipartisan committee. Well, on today's show, we'll try to better understand the immigration conversation and look at what it really means for all of us.
How does our current immigration system work? What are the proposed changes? How many people will it directly affect? What are the arguments for and against these changes? We'll delve into these questions and many more with constitutional law professor Isabel Medina of Loyola University.
But before we bring on Professor Medina, John, maybe we can look at the broader picture of immigration reform. President Obama has said that now is the time for real reform. Do you agree with that?
Absolutely, and I think it's well overdue. Full disclosure, I happen to be of Mexican descent. My mother was born and raised in Mexico. I'm fluent in Spanish, very proud of my Mexican heritage, and with 11 million undocumented Latin Americans here and many more who are registered voters, I think the politicians are waking up and saying, if we don't get ahead of this problem, we're all going to be out of jobs. So it's time, I'd say.
All right, and it does seem as if the political will is there. Not sure. There seems to be a lot of controversy on both sides. We're going to hear from Louisiana Senator David Vitter, who has really come out very strongly opposed to this. We'll also hear what Senator Mary Landrieu has to say about the plan that's been proposed. Stay with us. Coming up next, we will welcome constitutional law professor Isabel Medina from Loyola University. So stay tuned to the show. We'll be right back. Everyone, and welcome back to the program. Well, the next few months could bring about sweeping changes to the immigration system as the president plans to push an ambitious plan that could provide nearly 11 million immigrants, undocumented workers in this country with a path to citizenship. Although a bipartisan group of 8 senators has proposed a reform plan, Louisiana Senator David Vitter says it isn't getting through Congress without a big fight.
Here today to help us better understand the issues at stake is Professor Isabel Medina. Professor Medina has been teaching at Loyola Law School here in New Orleans since 1991. She has been a prolific writer and speaker on the subject of immigration for many years. Professor Medina, thanks for being with us. Why don't you help explain, sort of big picture, broad strokes, what is this immigration situation, the current status, and where the president is hoping to take us?
Well, I'd say for the past decade, Americans have become increasingly concerned about what they perceive as the number of undocumented or unauthorized immigrants living in the United States. In the 90s, we experienced what were considered to be kind of record numbers of people coming across the border, and there was this perception that the federal government wasn't doing enough about it. That is something that dramatically changed under the administration of President Obama, who made it a #1 goal of his national security policy to make sure that he would come down very harshly on border security, and that he would increase the enforcement efforts towards deportation, particularly of persons who've engaged in criminal activity, but also actually persons who are here without out of status.
Was he successful in those goals?
He was very successful in strengthening the security of the border. The administration itself reports that they've reduced the numbers of people coming across the border by 80%. So it is actually a substantial number. His record on deportations is also similarly good. And I'd say a number of immigrant support organizations actually come down hard on the president's administration for adopting such a harsh line, deporting persons who are here without authorization. And you could well ask me, well, why are people concerned about deporting people who are here without permission? And the problem is that increasing numbers of those people are members of what are American families. That is, they may have come here without permission, but their spouses or the parents or their siblings and even now their children are all American citizens. And so when we talk about deporting all persons who are here without permission, you're talking about breaking up families of American citizens. And that's what many people don't realize, is that
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
it's complicated.
But when you look at the number of deportations, as you just pointed out, and you look at the fact that although the perception is that perhaps there are lots of undocumented workers flooding into the country, but the numbers just don't bear that out. Help us to understand when we hear that the system is broken. What is broken about the system?
Well, part of what is broken about the system is that for a long time, American society and the American economy depended upon the presence of undocumented workers. It was only in 1986 that the United States passed a statute that prohibited employment of undocumented workers. But huge sectors of our economy, the service economy, the agricultural economy, relied on the presence of those workers. Even after we adopted employer sanctions, the political and popular will was simply not there to adopt a harsh enforcement of those statutes. And so it was really only in the 21st century that you began to see a real devotion to enforcement of the prohibition against employing workers. And that, again, to a certain extent, it started under the Republican administrations, but really, again, under the Obama administration, employer sanctions, what are called employer sanctions, has seen very, very aggressive enforcement.
Well, let me ask you the follow-up question. There are approximately, it's estimated, 11 million undocumented Hispanics in this country. President Obama is saying now is the time to try and give them an opportunity to stay here legally. There's a path. Why don't you explain, as far as you understand, what are some of the steps or what are some of the ways that this might happen?
Well, generally there are going to be, the way that we did it the last time we did it in 1986, there were some requirements that were put in place, such as it applied only to people who had lived a certain number of years in the United States. It applied to people who had not engaged in criminal activity, serious felony, or at least 3 misdemeanors, and so it actually left out a good chunk of people. We are likely to have a system come out of the various proposals that are being put on the table now that looks a little bit like that. The 11 undocumenteds are not just Latinos. A good number of them are, but some of them are from Africa, some of them are from African countries, some of them are from Asian countries, China, the Philippines. But you are right that the majority are Hispanic and Mexican American, or of Mexican, sometimes some Mexican American origin, because some of them may be children of U.S. citizens who straddle the border. Many families who live along the border straddle the border, go back and forth, and so even though their parents are U.S. citizen or their grandparents are U.S. citizen, they've ended up being born in Mexico or lived abroad in Mexico, and for whatever reason, the parents haven't satisfied the requirements to have their children inherit their citizenship. And the other part of that is that for a long time, our legal immigration system hasn't responded to the fact that we do have sectors of the economy that rely on low-skilled or unskilled workers as part of our economy, and so we kind of cut back on the number of visas, legal visas, available for that kind of worker. And I think most of the plans that I think the Senate plan and the President's plan incorporate a part of this, that we need to increase the number of immigrant visas available for work at the level at which our economy needs it, and that we need to provide more visas for family-based immigration.
Well, I'm very curious for both of you, John and Professor Medina. This is such a big part of the president's second term in office, but what about the popular will? What about the political will? From your perspective, dealing with legal issues concerning immigrants and immigration, what are your feelings about it?
Well, I'm very interested in this topic. You know, again, I said I'm Hispanic American. I'm Mexican American. I'm former first vice president of the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce of Louisiana. I served 2 terms in the late 1990s and the early 2000s. I represent a lot of Hispanics who are injured in accidents and have claims against insurance companies. I believe that nationally the statistics say that America is ready to figure out a solution. This unending debate is hurting the country. It's hurting our image in the world as a leader of a place of refuge for citizens of the world. In Louisiana, I think that there's less will overall. We're divided. Senator Landrieu's in favor of it. Senator Vitter is throwing stones at the idea. I believe it's going to happen. I believe that history is going to judge those in favor of it as being more wise, because these are our brothers and sisters. This is a nation of immigrants, and it's going to happen. I think I salute President Obama for this. I think it's going to happen. I think the devil's in the details. We got to watch out for those details. It is unquestionably true. And my last comment on this is, if you had breakfast this morning, if you had fresh fruit, odds are it was picked by an immigrant. 25% of the workforce is, according to the Pew Hispanic research, 25% of that workforce is illegal. Another huge percentage are immigrant visas. If you had your bed made in a hotel, almost the vast majority is Hispanic workers. Your children are cared for. You trust your children in the care of Hispanic workers. Let's show some care and respect for these people who are already in our homes, preparing our food, plucking the feathers off that chicken you ate at Wendy's today. So let's remember that and figure out a solution.
And as you mentioned when we were talking earlier, after Hurricane Katrina, so many of them were here helping people get their homes back together again.
Yeah, you talk about amnesty, let's talk about amnesia. Those are the people who saved our hides after Hurricane Katrina. Nobody was asking for papers at that point. Nobody was asking for that. Let's remember that. You know, these were the people working for those construction companies and saving us and getting us back on track. We would be devastated still without those Hispanics. Let's remember that.
And before, Professor Medina, we give you a chance to respond to that, I think we have a clip with Senator Vitter. Do we have time to go ahead and play that clip right now? Okay, let's go ahead and hear what Senator Vitter has to say, and we'll see what Senator Landrieu has to say and get your response, okay?
We have history as a God, and history suggests this brand of so-called comprehensive immigration reform, this promise of enforcement as long as we have an amnesty, all of those things put together is a recipe for failure.
He says it's a recipe for failure. Your response to that?
I think he's, with all due respect to Senator Vitter, I think he's wrong about that. I think we have a long-standing population here in the United States that is essentially a good, hard-working type of population that now has really strong ties to the United States. Some of their children are U.S. citizens, their families are U.S. citizens. They're here because they want to be, because they want to participate, because they want to contribute, as you said. When you were talking earlier about the popular will, I think it's fair to look at the 3 states that bear the brunt of the undocumented population, which are California, New York, and Texas, and they are probably the most supportive and the most pushing for immigration reform of some kind that would provide a path to legalization for that community. Even a state that has generated as harsh a legal kind of initiative as Arizona, if you actually travel along the border and look at on a city by city, town by town, there's a lot of not everybody in Arizona was in favor of the statutes that were actually adopted. So I think clearly we are divided. I think that the mood in the country and the mood in the Senate and the House with President Obama's leadership on this, I think we're going to see some reform. Now, I agree with you. The devil is in the details, and I don't know what that final piece of legislation ends up looking like.
Well, time will tell. And as we go to the break, we will see what Senator Landrieu has to say about this and get your comments when we come back. But stay tuned, because when we come back, we're going to be taking your questions about immigration reform with our guest, Professor Isabel Medina. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.